So this is an analysis where people looked at the total cost of care for some chronic conditions. And they compared the people who are adherent to their drugs to the people who do not adhere to those drugs. And they saw that, typically for adherent patients, the overall cost of care tends to be lower. Of course, there's a little bit more drug spend, obviously, because if you adhere, you spend more on drugs, duh. But this is outweighed by an enormous savings in healthcare costs, mostly from hospital admissions. So net, there's actually less spend if you get your patients to take these drugs. We use those numbers to approximate the size of the adherence market for several chronic conditions in the US. And we estimated that the size of the adherence market for heart failure is about $45 billion per year. For diabetes, $70 billion per year. Just as a relationship, so here the best-selling drugs at the moment, all around $3 billion revenue, plus or minus. It's like a fraction of that money here. So why on earth would you not try to go for the other 85%? So at this point, the old-hand pharmaceutical executives usually tell me, well, young man, we've tried that many times before and we failed miserably. And that's true, you did. Many companies had disease management in the 90s. It was all the rage. Like this nice nurse from Alabama that would call you to take your statin. That didn't work. Merck had Matco as the ultimate integration play. It failed and had to be sold. AstraZeneca had actually bought an oncology chain in the US, and it had to close it down and give it back to the hospitals from which they bought it, just because physicians would be suspicious of ulterior motives. So historically, this hasn't worked all that well. And now you're asking why this would work today. And I think it will work today because the environment has changed fundamentally. The one change is sort of the opportunity cost. What was different in pharma than in other industries is that the products are so outrageously profitable that any service that tends to be more profitable in any other industry would just be a distraction for management. Because at 80% gross margins, there's just no way that you can make more money by adding services. So these services were an afterthought, a way to increase sales, but they were never really meant to be value creating and monetized in their own right. So today, as the profitability of pharmaceuticals erodes, of course, the calculus changes slightly. And also, companies have become better at controlling the risk that might be involved with offering services by regulators and other supervisory agencies. And then we know what to do now. So with the services that companies are currently offering around their existing products, like adherence solutions, patient support, things like that, they have actually gained some familiarity with how to administer services, how to design services, how to understand payer needs, patient needs, provider needs. They haven't really built commercial models around these services that would actually be compensated for the value of the service as opposed to subsidizing a service with higher drug sales. But at least they know a little bit what to do. And then the technology has changed. There are a lot more tools today, a lot more analytical capabilities with predictive modeling, big data analysis. But the biggest change of all is the change in payment models. And I think that is going to drive the commercial model for pharma in a very fundamental way. Because payers around the world, not just in the US and Europe, are more saying, okay, what we really want is not more pills. We want to control the disease. We want to have better outcomes for diabetics, for depressive patients, for heart disease patients. And that's what we will pay you for. And if you can demonstrate to us that you improve disease control, we will pay you for disease control no matter how you achieve it. Whether you achieve it with drugs, with support mechanisms, which drugs you use, we don't really care as long as you get us the results. So in those changes in payment models will actually drive a fundamental rethinking both on the payer side and on the supplier side. So just a few of these amazing technologies that you come across these days, like smartphone-based adherence tracking, big data modeling. It's actually quite remarkable what we can do today to help patients cope with disease. So these payment models appear everywhere if you look at it. You have in the US, Matt Porch this morning explained it very well, all kinds of variants of risk-sharing agreements under which providers are being held accountable for the clinical quality that they achieve for their patients, but also for the cost that they spend per risk-adjusted patients. And there are all kinds of arrangements from kind of full capitation, where you get a fixed amount per patient, to some sort of a gain share where you predict the cost and then you share with the payer some of the savings. You have the clinical commissioning groups in the UK that have a lot of freedom in how they structure procurement decisions. You have outcomes-based payments for oncology drugs in Italy. So there's more opportunity to actually have a dialogue with payers about getting paid for your results as opposed to for your drugs. So how do you do that? It's not easy, because any fundamental transformation is hard, and as we've heard many times today, pharmaceutical companies tend to be on the conservative side, to say it carefully. Others say they're actually run by accountants and lawyers. So it's not easy to actually change the business model that has been so successful and so deeply ingrained in a fundamental way. So you definitely need senior management support. And you do need to get the general counsel on board very early on, because the lawyers are able to derail any movement towards service delivery and paying for services before you even finish your sentence. And then you need to bring, and this is actually also something where pharmaceutical companies are really bad, you have to bring in cross-functional support. So you actually have to talk to each other within the company. Because the government affairs folks, the public policy folks, they get these changes because they talk to policymakers. The commercial folks kind of see it on the ground. The R&D folks, they just still think they can throw molecules and biologics over the transom and then somebody will make a business of them. So you really have to create cross-functional teams that understand the market and understand the patient, understand the payers, and bring these considerations back into the development and clinical trials program, because otherwise you end up with a drug that might be clinically very effective, but is really not what the market and payers want.